this lesson is going to be about the bow, but we will begin by using a stick because it's the simplest object on which we can experiment and learn about the principles of our hold, the position of the fingers, matters of balance and pressure. Let us start by trying to balance it at the middle point. Would you like to try this? Find the exact middle of your stick where it balances. Then between the thumb on its side and the middle finger, the second finger, with dropped wrist, with rounded second finger and rounded thumb as well on its side, hold the stick. Actually, hold is an exaggeration. Just keep the stick from falling. Little Karen, your little finger is pointing straight out. Try to put it on top of the stick now. And the first finger, let it lean and embrace the stick. The fourth finger is too far on top of the stick. It should be a little behind, just nearly at the top. And the space between the fingers must be approximately equal. They must be very soft, the whole hand must be hanging, no tension anywhere at all, because you don't need it to hold the stick in the middle. That's not bad at all for the first time, Karen. Look at Rosemary. She does it very well. Rosemary, can you move the hand down begin moving it down to its normal position and see where you begin feeling the weight of the stick in the little finger where it begins balancing it. You see? The sooner you feel that, the more sensitive your fingers are. Of course, they must remain sensitive even at the very fog. And there the weight is the full weight of the stick in the hand. Incidentally, so that we are sure of our nomenclature, violinists call this finger the first, this the second, this the third, that the fourth. This applies to both hands, of course, because in violin playing, the fingers are always opposed to the thumb. Piano playing, they are all equal. To begin with, this first hold, the ring, as it were, the middle finger and the thumb. The thumb must be touching the stick at the top edge, including a bit of the nail, so that it may follow the stroke in the natural direction of its own joints. The thumb would normally slide if it weren't anchored to one spot. In the beginning you will find it will slide. This is the action it should be able to do, and this is the action it will do when it is finally established in contact with the stick. The second finger touches the stick along the distance between the first and second joint and into the first joint. It mainly around the first joint. The first finger leans on the stick, not completely on its side, but again at about a 45-degree angle, so that it is in a position to exert pressure and to be in line with the rest of the knuckles. It is not actually correct to speak of pressure when it is really the weight of the arm that is allowed to fall on the first finger, resisted by this section of the first finger, which carries the weight, which must never cave in. It also touches the bow, when necessary, to its tip, all the way around the stick. The fourth finger is nearly vertical, but it is exerting its pressure not on top of the bow, but slightly on the side of the bow, because it balances again the first phalange of the first finger. If it were on top of the bow, the first finger would lose contact with the bow completely. The third finger has, to a certain extent, the function of the fourth in that it can assist the lift of the fourth. We can hold it a little with the third. But it also has another function in what we call the up bow. That is when the arm moves from its extended position towards the body. And then it has an action against the thumb, which pushes the bow against the first finger, which can then apply its pressure, which it couldn't do if the third finger were not there. Our hold of the bow is built of two arcs. The one we have considered the middle hold between thumb and second finger, and the other one is the bridge, of which one pair is this first finger, and the other pair is separated into two legs, the third and fourth fingers. We must always be aware of this bridge, which spreads the weight of the arm, the weight which is mainly transferred to the first finger, but then retransferred back to the whole bridge that carries it. It is possible to illustrate this feeling in the hand. If we imagine that the pairs were allowed to move, they would move in that direction. And although this is not, our fingers don't slide on the stick, inside the hand we feel these pressures. We can exercise, however, the spreading of the knuckles, which is a good exercise for violinists in both hands. Sometimes the first finger is more closely bridged, as it were, with the fourth finger, at other times with the third finger, and often with both simultaneously. It is necessary to remember our basic principle of space. There must be space between the fingers, space in this way through the circle, including the thumb, which allows each finger to act in its own particular way. The angle of the knuckles is at almost a 45-degree angle. This has several reasons. Our main articulations in the wrist and the knuckles, if we held an object normally, are vertical. This would not do for violin playing, where we are concerned with a continuous stroke, a melodic line. This involves a horizontal motion. Therefore, we bend our knuckles and wrists slightly to give us the advantage of the stroke, keeping the thumb at right angles to the stick. There is another reason for this. The fourth finger, with its shortness, must be, as we said, almost vertically on top of the stick. Whereas the first finger, this joint, this, what I call the phalange, must be approximately in its resting middle normal position, horizontal, which means that the hand has to rise from the horizontal of the first finger to the vertical of the fourth. This accounts for this bend. A third reason for this angle is the position of the hand when we play at the point. That is when the limb is at its farthest from the body, its outstretched position, in contrast to its folded position when we approach the frog or the nut of the bow where it is nearest the body. Our balance must be equally secure, both in the position of the wrist when it is bent in the folded position, as when it is at the end of an extended arm. This involves great flexibility. The flexibility of the pressure and the lift in either the down bow direction, going into the extension, or the upward direction going into the fold. And that happens along every smallest segment of the stroke. Flexibility is required in many ways, as not only pushing and pulling and lifting, but also in circles. In circles which take us from one string to another, or take us from one stroke into the next, or in very complicated ellipses and circles involved in connecting the two halves of the bow. To test the softness and flexibility of your fingers, it is a good idea to hold the stick vertically, raise it with your fingers and the wrist to maximum height, and let the weight of the stick carry your fingers and wrist down. Invert the pose, raise the stick, and let the fingers fall with the stick down. When you are assured of the finger's flexibility, try moving the stick horizontally with fingers and wrist, and vertically. Then combine the two actions, moving the forearm, moving the arm a bit, so that you form a circle. This is a combination of the vertical and the horizontal. You can also circle in the other way, of course. Take the bow stick at this time in the middle, so that when you place your fingers on it in the correct position, there is no strain on the fingers at all. It's automatically in balance. Now, raise the stick up in the fingers into the knuckles, into the folded position of the fingers, so that the stick actually touches the inside of the fingers all the way. And then straighten out the fingers, let it fall. Again, do the same thing, raise it right in, and lengthen the fingers. That's fine. Do the same thing, moving the hand a little off-center towards the frog or nut, so you feel the weight of the stick, and do the same thing. Raise it. This way, you not only do the flexibility exercise, but you feel the balance of the bow and the fingers. Of course, we do not play the violin in the vertical direction, so I would like perhaps Garen to test David's flexibility in the horizontal direction by holding on to one end of the stick and pulling his fingers backwards and forwards, by pushing and pulling the stick. That's right, pull. The fingers should remain at the same place and be very flexible, just holding enough to not to lose their place, but flexible enough to be moved. Now, this is a crude way of testing, a crude way of testing the horizontal flexibility of the fingers by pulling and pushing. I'd like to see if your fingers are sensitive enough to react to gravity doing the same thing. Hold the stick vertically in the normal middle position. Now push the stick up with your fingers and wrist alone, straight vertically, and let it fall, pulling the fingers and the wrist with it. Again, up and down. We have to control the motion in the other way as well, so turn the stick around, again vertically, and push it up, and let it fall into the fingers. As high up as you can, and then let it fall. The thumb always rounded on its side, every finger in its right place, all the details very precisely attended to. Thank you. We have spoken a great deal about the bow without using a bow, and now I'm going to take one. We've come to the point when we can speak about strength. Strength in violin playing is of two kinds. There's the one which is concerned with the launching or catching of momentum. That is like a pulse. There is one movement which occurs intermittently with a passive reaction in between. Then there is the other kind of strength, which is required for prolonged continuous effort, as when you may be pushing or pulling a heavy load up a hill. For the first, which is essential to a change of directions, because we all know when we throw a ball against the wall, it rebounds. When we catch, we rebound. When we throw, we give one impulse and then let the ball do the rest. The same thing happens in the change of directions between the down bow and the up bow on the violin. I would like to compare it with what I might call the smack bounce. That is, if we smack something or someone, perhaps a teacher, next us, this way, we smack and bounce back as the ball does off the wall. This movement must be like a whiplash, like a wave. We don't smack like that. We let the movement go all the way down into the tips of our fingers and back again. Now, this would account for the change of direction from a down bow to an up bow. The other way, we would imagine something behind us or on the side that we would smack with the back of our hand. And this is the way that would happen. And that would account for the change from the up bow to the down bow. Perhaps we could illustrate that, or perhaps you'd all like to try first just the smacking movement without the stick or the bow. Just smack away from you, like that. That's it. Not so down, perhaps a little bit more on the side plane. That's fine. That's very good. And try it going up a little bit like that, as if you were playing on the G string. Very good. And now the change, the other smack. Very good. Now perhaps you'd like to show it with the bow. I know that you won't lose the bow when you do that. And let me see now the smack to the side, that one. Very good. And the smack with the top part of the hand back behind you or on the side. That's right. Very good. Very good. That's fine. Now, this same intermittent effort is associated with the making of a circle. If we give a circle a certain impetus, again, we just give it one push and the rest is carried around. Can you do this making circles, giving each circle its new impetus? Very good. And the other way around, the other circle? Excellent. Excellent. The second aspect of strength is involved in the continuous pull and push, as opposed to the intermittent effort of the change of directions in the smack bounce. I'm using my left hand to substitute for the friction of the bow on the strings, this friction which is in proportion to the weight of the bow on the strings. In the down bow, the continuous pull looks like this, and you will see that there's an adjustment of the whole arm rotating towards the bow, towards the first finger, and in fact involving the shoulder to a certain extent. And in the up bow, a folding back, and this continuous adjustment is required in order to keep the bow on the straight line, as otherwise it would be describing arcs like that, or like that. And finally, as we approach the frog, the folded position in which even the shoulder blade contributes to the final motion. Now let us put the pieces of this little jigsaw together. We know the pull and the push, this continuous feeling along the whole stroke. But this stroke can also be very short, and we must still feel that same pull-push. We know the smack bounce, which is normally a very short, sharp motion, but that can also include in one motion the whole length of the bow, in either way. Now, if we put them together in a whole bow stroke, it will go something like this. We pull, we smack bounce, we push, we smack bounce. And this can easily take the form of a figure 8, much exaggerated, but it's an easy way to get into the feeling. Having said this, I would like to remind you that we can return to the no effort state, that state of floating sound when all we have to do is to balance the bow and to carry the weight in the shoulder. And that way the shoulder becomes quite aware of its responsibilities. We must control all degrees between this state of floating and the full strength that we may need. You see, the bow and its motion is a continuous, never-ending one, as if it were an endless bellows, as if we were given lungs which never ran out of air, never had to catch breath. That is the characteristic of violin sound and violin playing. Next time you will handle a bow, it will be to draw a sound on the violin. I hope that in our review of the preparatory exercises and the analysis of the motions, you have understood them well enough so that the next sound is going to be a nice one. Your first sound will be a lovely one. That's very rare among beginning violinists. But before we can do that, we will have to see how the violin is held. That will be the subject of our next